The lantern swung from Tanner Garrison's calloused hand as he pushed open the heavy barn door that autumn evening in 1883. And the last thing he expected to find between the hay bales was a pair of terrified green eyes staring back at him from a dirt-streaked face framed by tangled auburn hair. He froze, his other hand instinctively moving toward the rifle slung across his back, but something in those eyes stopped him. Fear, yes, but also desperation so raw it hit him like a punch to the gut. The woman scrambled backward, her worn dress catching on the rough wood of the stall, and pressed herself against the far wall as if she could disappear into it. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and cracking. "Just one night, please. I will be gone by morning. You will never know I was here." Tanner lowered the lantern slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and unthreatening. He was a big man, standing well over 6 feet with broad shoulders built from years of working his mountain ranch alone, and he knew how intimidating he could appear. The woman looked like she might bolt like a wild horse at any moment, though he could not imagine where she thought she would run to. His property sat high in the mountains outside Bozeman, Montana, miles from the nearest neighbor, and darkness had already fallen thick and cold. "Easy now," he said, his deep voice as gentle as he could make it. "I am not going to hurt you." She watched him with those wary eyes, her chest rising and falling rapidly beneath the thin fabric of her dress. Now that he looked closer, he could see she was shivering, whether from cold or fear or both. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, and her hands were scratched and bleeding. Brambles and leaves clung to her hair and clothes. "How long have you been hiding in my barn?" he asked. "Since afternoon," she admitted quietly. "I heard you working near the house, so I stayed quiet. I am sorry. I know this is trespassing, but I had nowhere else to go." Tanner set the lantern on a nearby post and took a step back, giving her more space. "You running from someone?" Her jaw tightened, and for a moment he thought she would not answer. Then she gave a barely perceptible nod. "My stepfather. He is a cruel man, and when my mother died 3 weeks ago, there was nothing left to stop him from doing whatever he pleased. I left 2 days ago and have been walking ever since." The matter-of-fact way she said it made Tanner's blood run cold. He had seen enough of the world during his years as a cattle driver before settling in these mountains to know exactly what kind of cruelty she meant. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, but he kept his voice calm. "What is your name?" She hesitated, then seemed to decide she had little left to lose. "Olivia Cooper." "Olivia," he repeated, testing the name. "I am Tanner Garrison. This is my ranch, and you are welcome to stay more than one night if you need to." Surprise flickered across her face, followed quickly by suspicion. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because no woman should have to beg for basic shelter and safety. Come up to the house. You look half frozen, and I have stew warming on the stove." Olivia shook her head quickly. "I cannot pay you. Did I ask for payment?" Tanner picked up the lantern again. "Look, Miss Cooper, you can stay out here in the cold if you want, but I would not be able to sleep knowing you are freezing in my barn when I have a perfectly good house with a fire and food. It is your choice, but I am heading back now, and the offer stands." He turned and walked toward the barn door, listening carefully. For a long moment, there was only silence, and he thought she would stay hidden. Then he heard the soft rustle of hay and quiet footsteps behind him. He did not turn around, just kept walking at a steady pace toward the house, letting her follow at her own distance. The ranch house was modest but solidly built, with thick log walls that kept out the mountain cold. Tanner had built it himself 5 years ago when he had first claimed this land, and he had made it sturdy and comfortable if not fancy. He pushed open the door and stood aside, letting Olivia enter first. She stepped inside cautiously, her eyes taking in everything as if cataloging potential dangers or escape routes. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace crackling warmly against one wall. A simple table with 2 chairs sat near the stove, and a pair of comfortable chairs faced the fire. 2 doors led off to what were presumably bedrooms. "Sit by the fire," Tanner said, moving to the stove. "I will get you some food." Olivia moved toward the fire but remained standing, her arms wrapped around herself. Tanner ladled stew into a bowl and cut a thick slice of bread, then brought both to the table. "Please eat." She sat slowly, eyeing the food like it might vanish if she looked away. The moment she picked up the spoon, though, her hunger won out, and she ate quickly, barely pausing between bites. Tanner filled a second bowl and brought it to her along with a cup of water, which she accepted with a grateful nod. When she finally slowed down, some color had returned to her cheeks. She wrapped her hands around the warm bowl and looked up at him. "Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Tanner is fine," he said, leaning against the counter. "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" 21, she said. "Old enough to be making my own choices, but my stepfather did not see it that way. He thought I should be grateful for whatever attention he gave me, and when I refused, he got angry. After my mother passed, I knew I had to leave before something worse happened." Tanner felt that anger rising in him again but pushed it down. "Where were you planning to go?" "I do not know," she admitted quietly. "I just knew I had to get away from Helena. I thought maybe I could find work somewhere as a cook or a laundress. I can sew too. But I did not realize how far apart everything is out here or how cold it would get at night. I saw your ranch from the road and thought if I could just rest for one night, I could keep going tomorrow." "And go where?" Tanner asked gently. "Olivia, it is late October. Winter comes hard and fast in these mountains. If you keep walking without supplies or proper clothes, you will not last a week." She looked down at her hands. "What choice do I have? You could stay here," he said. The words came out before he had fully thought them through, but once he said them, he knew they were right. "I could use help around the ranch, someone to help with cooking and mending and such. The work is honest and I would pay you a fair wage. You would have your own room, and I give you my word that I would never lay a hand on you except in respect." Olivia studied him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Tanner pulled out the other chair and sat down across from her. "I have been alone up here for 5 years. I chose this solitude after spending too many years around people who only cared about money or power or getting ahead at any cost. I built this ranch to have a place where a man's word still means something, where honest work is valued. If I turned you out knowing you have nowhere to go, I would be no better than the people I left behind. You are not worried about what people might say, having an unmarried woman living on your ranch," he shrugged. "My nearest neighbor is 5 miles away and I go into Bozeman maybe once a month for supplies. I do not much care what people say." A small, tired smile crossed her face, the first he had seen. "You are a strange man, Tanner Garrison." "Maybe so," he said, returning the smile. "But the offer is genuine. Stay as long as you need, work if you want to, and when you feel ready to move on, I will help you get wherever you want to go." Olivia was quiet for a long time, staring into the remains of her stew. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Just until spring. If the offer is still good, then I would like to stay until spring." "The offer is good," Tanner assured her. "The bedroom on the left is yours. There should be blankets in the chest, and I will heat some water so you can wash up if you would like." "That would be wonderful," she said softly. Tanner busied himself heating water on the stove and hauling in the large tin tub from the back porch. He set it up in her room and filled it partway with hot water mixed with cold from the pump, then left her to her privacy. He heard the door close softly and the sound of her settling into the bath. He sat by the fire, his mind racing. What had he just done? He had been alone for so long, content with his own company and the rhythm of ranch work. Now he had invited a woman to stay, a stranger running from God knew what kind of danger. Her stepfather might come looking for her. There might be law involved, though he doubted it. Men like that rarely wanted attention from the authorities. But when he pictured those desperate eyes pleading for just one night, he knew he had made the right choice. Whatever complications arose, he would handle them. That was what a man did. The next morning, Tanner woke before dawn as always. He dressed quietly and went about his morning chores, feeding the horses and the few cattle he kept, collecting eggs from the chickens and checking the property. The air was crisp and cold, his breath steaming in the early light. Winter was definitely coming. When he returned to the house, Olivia was up and had coffee brewing. She had changed into the same dress, now brushed clean as best she could manage, and her hair was pulled back in a simple braid. She looked less like a frightened creature and more like a young woman trying to find her footing. "Good morning," she said, a bit uncertain. "I hope you do not mind I found the coffee." "Not at all," Tanner said, hanging his hat and coat by the door. "Thank you." She poured 2 cups and brought them to the table. "I should earn my keep. Tell me what needs doing." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a routine. Olivia proved to be a hard worker, attacking every task with determined efficiency. She took over the cooking, which was a blessing because Tanner's culinary skills extended mainly to stew and beans. She cleaned and organized, mended his clothes, and even helped with some of the lighter ranch work. But more than the work, Tanner found himself appreciating her company. Olivia was smart and funny once she relaxed enough to show it. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and she would tell him stories about growing up in Helena before her mother married the stepfather. Her mother had been a seamstress, teaching Olivia the trade, and they had been happy until she took up with Frank Cooper. "What about you?" Olivia asked one evening in early November. "How does a man end up alone on a mountain?" Tanner leaned back in his chair, stretching his long legs toward the fire. "I was a cattle driver for 10 years, moving herds from Texas up to Montana and Wyoming. Saw a lot of the country, met a lot of people. Most of them were good folk, but the work was hard, and after a while I wanted something that was mine. I had saved my wages, and when I saw this land, I knew it was what I had been looking for." "No family?" she asked gently. "My parents died when I was young. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I was 16 and I left Virginia to head west. Never saw much point in going back. That must have been hard, being alone so young. It taught me to rely on myself," he said, "but I will not lie and say it was not lonely sometimes." She met his eyes across the fire. "It does not have to be." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Tanner felt something shift in his chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. He had known for days now that his feelings for Olivia were growing beyond simple hospitality or friendship. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that. She was strong and kind and resilient. She made the house feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep between work. But he also knew she was healing from trauma, rebuilding her sense of safety and self. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel pressured or uncomfortable. "Olivia," he said carefully, "I want you to know that you are safe here for as long as you want to stay, not just until spring. If you wanted to make this permanent, I would welcome it, but there is no pressure. You do what is right for you." She was quiet for a moment, then rose from her chair and crossed to where he sat. She reached out tentatively and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You are a good man," Tanner Garrison. The best I have ever known. He covered her hand with his own, marveling at how small and delicate it felt. You deserve good things, Olivia Cooper. The first snow came in mid-November, covering the mountains in a blanket of white. Tanner had been preparing for weeks, stocking supplies and making sure the barn and house were ready for the harsh winter. He was glad Olivia was here and not out on the road somewhere. The thought of her trying to survive in this cold made him shudder. They were snowed in for 3 days during that first storm, but it did not feel like confinement. They worked together in comfortable companionship, cooking and talking, and sometimes just sitting in silence. Tanner taught her to play poker, and she proved to be surprisingly good at it, beating him more often than not. "You are cheating somehow," he accused playfully after she won the 5th hand in a row. "I am not," she protested, laughing. "I am just better at reading people than you are." "Is that so?" He leaned forward, studying her face. "What am I thinking right now?" Her smile faded, replaced by something more serious. She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw her pupils dilate slightly, her breath catch. "You are thinking the same thing I am," she said softly. "And what is that?" "That this does not feel temporary anymore." Tanner reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers intertwined with his naturally, as if they had been doing this for years. "It does not have to be temporary," he said. "I meant what I said, Olivia. You can stay as long as you want." "What if I want to stay forever?" The question came out barely above a whisper. His heart hammered in his chest. "Then I would say that is the best news I have heard in my entire life." She stood, still holding his hand, and moved around the table to stand beside him. Tanner rose to face her, and they stood there for a moment, the firelight casting dancing shadows across her face. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he raised his hand and cupped her cheek. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. "Olivia, I am falling in love with you," he said, the words raw and honest. "I know it is soon, and I know you have been through hell, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way. You make everything better just by being here." Her eyes opened, bright with unshed tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too, Tanner. I think I started falling that first night when you offered me kindness without expecting anything in return. I have never known anyone like you." He bent slowly and kissed her, soft and gentle, a question and a promise all at once. She kissed him back, her arms sliding around his neck, and for a long moment they stood wrapped in each other, the rest of the world forgotten. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I want to do this right," Tanner said. "When the snow clears enough for travel, I want to take you into Bozeman and marry you proper if you will have me." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They stood there holding each other as the fire crackled and the snow fell outside, and Tanner thought about how strange life was. A few weeks ago, he had been alone, content but solitary. Now he had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, and she had found him purely by chance, hiding in his barn and begging for one night of shelter. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the small church in Bozeman. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, was a kind elderly man who asked no uncomfortable questions about where Olivia had come from or why she had no family present. Tanner had bought Olivia a new dress for the occasion, deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and she had never looked more beautiful. They had no guests except the preacher's wife, who served as witness, but it did not matter. When Tanner slipped the simple gold band onto Olivia's finger and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days, he meant every word with his whole heart. And when she made the same promises to him, he saw the truth of it in her eyes. The ride back to the ranch was cold but clear, the winter sun making the snow sparkle like diamonds. Olivia sat close to him on the wagon seat, and he kept one arm around her shoulders while guiding the horses with the other. "Mrs. Garrison," he said, testing the name. She smiled up at him. "I like the sound of that." "Me too." That night, they truly became husband and wife in every sense. Tanner was gentle and patient, letting Olivia set the pace, and she responded with a passion that surprised and delighted them both. Afterward, they lay tangled together in his bed, now their bed, and talked until the early hours of the morning. "I never thought I could feel this safe," Olivia murmured, her head on his chest, "or this happy." Tanner kissed the top of her head. "You are safe with me always, I promise you that." Winter deepened, and they settled into married life. The ranch work continued, harder now with the snow and cold, but Olivia helped wherever she could. She learned to milk the cow, feed the animals, and even helped Tanner repair fence line on the clearer days. But there was also a joy to it all that had never been there before. Coming in from the cold to find the house warm and Olivia smiling in greeting made every hardship worthwhile. They laughed together, worked together, and loved each other with an intensity that sometimes took Tanner's breath away. One evening in January, as they sat by the fire, Olivia suddenly grew quiet and thoughtful. Tanner looked up from the harness he was mending to find her watching him with an odd expression. "What is it?" he asked. "I am with child," she said simply. Tanner dropped the harness, his heart stopping for a moment before starting again double time. "You are sure?" she nodded. "I am sure. I am about 2 months along, I think. The baby should come in late summer." He crossed to her in 2 long strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "That is wonderful," he said, his voice thick. "That is the most wonderful news." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You are happy." "Happy, Olivia, I am beyond happy. A child, our child." He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "I am going to be a father." She laughed, the sound bright with relief and joy. "And I am going to be a mother. I was so worried you might think it was too soon." "Too soon?" He shook his head. "This is perfect. You are perfect. Everything about this is perfect." The rest of the winter passed in a blur of preparations. Tanner built a cradle from smooth pine, working on it in the evenings by the fire while Olivia sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They talked about names, about what kind of parents they wanted to be, about the future they were building together. Spring came gradually, the snow melting to reveal the green mountainside beneath. Olivia's belly began to swell with their child, and Tanner found himself constantly amazed by the miracle of it. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, and wonder how he had gotten so lucky. But with the spring thaw came a concern that had been lurking in the back of Tanner's mind all winter. Frank Cooper. Olivia's stepfather might come looking for her once the roads were passable again. He did not want to worry Olivia, but he took precautions. He made sure the rifle was always loaded and within reach. He kept a closer eye on the road leading to the ranch, and he made quiet inquiries when he went to town, asking if anyone had been looking for a young woman matching Olivia's description. For months, there was nothing. Then, in early May, the storekeeper mentioned that a man from Helena had been asking questions about a runaway stepdaughter the week before. Tanner thanked him calmly and finished his business, but his mind was racing on the ride home. He needed to tell Olivia to prepare her, but he also did not want to frighten her, especially in her condition. When he reached the ranch, he found her hanging laundry in the afternoon sun, one hand pressed to her lower back. She was 6 months along now, her belly round and obvious, and the sight of her made his heart clench with love and protectiveness. "Olivia, we need to talk," he said, helping her with the last sheet. She heard the seriousness in his tone and set down the basket. "What is wrong?" He told her about the man in Bozeman, watching her face grow pale. But then she set her jaw in that determined way he had come to know well. "He cannot take me back, Tanner. I am married now. I am carrying your child. He has no claim on me." "I know," Tanner said. "And he will not take you anywhere, I promise you that. But I wanted you to know in case he shows up here. I want you to stay in the house if any strangers come around and keep the rifle close." "You think he would try something violent?" "I do not know," Tanner admitted. "But I am not taking any chances with you or our baby." Frank Cooper arrived 3 days later. Tanner was working in the barn when he heard the sound of a horse approaching. He grabbed his rifle and stepped out to see a tall, lean man with a hard face and cold eyes riding up to the house. "This the Garrison place?" the man called. "It is," Tanner said, keeping the rifle visible but not pointed at the stranger. "What is your business here?" "Name is Frank Cooper. I am looking for my stepdaughter, Olivia. I was told she might be in this area." "What makes you think she is here?" Cooper's eyes narrowed. "I have been asking around. Heard tell of a man up in the mountains who got himself a wife last winter, and the timing seemed about right. Young woman with auburn hair and green eyes. That sound familiar?" Tanner stepped forward, placing himself between Cooper and the house. "Olivia is my wife now, legally married and expecting my child. Whatever claim you think you have on her ended the moment she became an adult and chose to leave your house." "She is still my responsibility," Cooper said, his voice hardening. "Her mother left her in my care, and I intend to fulfill that duty. Now bring her out here." "No." The word was flat and final. Cooper's hand moved toward the gun at his hip, but Tanner was faster, raising the rifle to point directly at the man's chest. "Do not do something you will regret. Olivia is not going anywhere with you. She is my wife, under my protection, and this is my land. You have no legal right to be here or to make demands. You think you can keep me from what is mine. She is not yours," Tanner said, his voice deadly calm. "She never was. She is a grown woman who made her own choice to leave a bad situation and build a new life. If you try to force her to do anything, you will answer to me, and I promise you will not like how that turns out." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Tanner could feel his heart pounding but kept his hand steady on the rifle. He would shoot if he had to protect Olivia and their child. He had no doubt about that. Finally, Cooper seemed to realize he was outmatched. His hand moved away from his gun. "This is not over," he said. "I will be talking to the law about this." "You do that," Tanner said. "Talk to the sheriff in Bozeman. Tell him how you want to forcibly take a married woman away from her husband. I am sure he will be very sympathetic." Cooper's face flushed red with anger, but he wheeled his horse around and rode off without another word. Tanner watched until he was out of sight down the road, then finally lowered the rifle. The front door opened and Olivia emerged, her face pale. "Is he gone?" "He is gone," Tanner assured her, going to her and wrapping her in his arms. "Are you all right?" "I am now," she said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I was so afraid." "I know, but I meant what I said. He has no claim on you, and I will not let him take you. You are mine, and I am yours, and that is the end of it." She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "I love you so much. I love you too." He kissed her forehead, then her lips. "Come on, let us get you back inside. All this excitement cannot be good for the baby." Cooper did not return, and when Tanner went to town the following week, the sheriff confirmed that no complaints had been filed. It seemed Cooper had decided the fight was not worth it after all. Tanner felt the tension he had been carrying finally release. They were safe. Olivia was safe. Summer came in full, and Olivia grew rounder by the day. She slowed down, unable to do as much physical work, but she kept busy with lighter tasks and preparations for the baby. Tanner loved watching her move around the house, one hand on her belly, humming softly to the child within. In late August, on a hot afternoon when the air was thick and heavy, Olivia's water broke. Tanner had been prepared for this, having brought in a midwife from town the week before to stay with them. The woman, a capable older lady named Mrs. Darnell, took charge immediately, sending Tanner to boil water and gather clean linens. The labor was long, stretching through the afternoon and into the evening. Tanner paced outside the bedroom door, hearing Olivia's cries and feeling utterly helpless. He had faced down angry cattle, dangerous men, and harsh weather, but nothing had prepared him for the fear of listening to his wife in pain and being unable to do anything about it. Finally, just as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, strong and loud. Tanner's knees nearly gave out with relief. Mrs. Darnell opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Garrison. A big, healthy boy." Tanner rushed past her into the room. Olivia lay in the bed, exhausted and sweaty but glowing with joy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. As Tanner approached, the baby's face scrunched up, and he let out another lusty cry. "He has good lungs," Tanner said, his voice cracking with emotion. "Just like his father," Olivia said, smiling tiredly. "Come meet your son." Tanner sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby. The child had a shock of dark hair and was red-faced from crying, but he was perfect. Absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" Olivia asked. They had discussed names for months, but now, looking at his son, Tanner knew. Thomas James Garrison, after my father. Thomas," Olivia repeated softly. "It is perfect." She placed the baby in Tanner's arms, and he held his son for the first time, marveling at how tiny and fragile he felt. Thomas quieted, his little eyes trying to focus on his father's face. Tanner felt tears running down his cheeks and did not bother to wipe them away. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise I am going to do my best by you. You have a mama who loves you more than anything, and together we are going to give you a good life." The baby made a small sound, and Tanner laughed through his tears. He looked at Olivia and saw she was crying too, but smiling. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything." "We gave it to each other," she said. "I love you, Tanner. I love you too, both of you." The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and constant wonder. Tanner had never known such exhaustion or such joy. Every milestone, from the first smile to the first tooth to the first time Thomas pulled himself up on wobbly legs, felt like a miracle. Olivia bloomed as a mother, patient and loving and fierce in her protection of their son. Watching her with Thomas made Tanner fall even more deeply in love with her, if that was possible. They were a family now, complete and whole, and the ranch felt full of life and laughter. They made trips to Bozeman as needed, and word gradually spread about the Garrison family. Neighbors who lived miles away would sometimes stop by, and they developed friendships with other families in the area. Olivia joined a women's group that met monthly in town, and Tanner occasionally helped neighbors with difficult ranch work in exchange for their help when he needed it. Life was good. Hard, sometimes, because ranch work was never easy, but good in all the ways that mattered. When Thomas was 2 years old, Olivia became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy seemed easier. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring, a tiny thing with auburn hair like her mother and blue eyes that would eventually turn the same green. "Caroline," Olivia said the moment she saw her. "Her name is Caroline Me." Tanner held his daughter, even smaller than Thomas had been, and felt his heart expand to accommodate this new love. "Caroline Me Garrison," he said. "Welcome to the family, little one." Thomas, now old enough to be curious, climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "Baby," he said, pointing. "That is right, your baby sister," Olivia said. "You are going to be a good big brother, are you not?" Thomas nodded solemnly, then reached out to gently pat Caroline's head. Tanner and Olivia exchanged a look over their children's heads, and no words were needed. This was everything they had dreamed of and more. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, eager to learn ranch work. Caroline was quieter but no less determined, with a quick mind and a talent for drawing that amazed them both. When Thomas was 8 and Caroline 6, Olivia became pregnant once more. The pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and Tanner worried constantly. But in the fall, she delivered another son whom they named Daniel. Their family was now complete, the house filled with the noise and chaos of 3 children. Tanner built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and expanding the main room. The ranch prospered, and they were able to hire some help, a young man named Peter who lived in the bunkhouse and helped with the heavy work. One evening, when Daniel was about 2 years old and the older children were finally asleep, Tanner and Olivia sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was a rare moment of peace and quiet, and Tanner savored it. "You ever think about that night?" Olivia asked suddenly. "When I was hiding in your barn." "I think about it all the time," Tanner said. "How close I came to never meeting you. What if I had not gone to the barn that evening? What if I had scared you away?" "But you did not," she said, taking his hand. "You offered me kindness when I had given up hope. You gave me shelter and safety and then so much more. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." "You gave me the same," Tanner said. "I did not even realize how lonely I was until you filled that emptiness. You and the children, you are everything to me." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I know Frank Cooper is probably long dead by now, but even if he were not, I would not care. This is my home. You are my home." "Always," Tanner promised, kissing the top of her head. The children grew as children do. Thomas developed into a fine young man, learning every aspect of ranch work and proving himself capable and responsible. Caroline's artistic talents blossomed, and she sold her drawings and paintings in Bozeman, contributing to the family income in her own way. Daniel, the youngest, proved to have a gift with animals, especially horses, and Tanner began to teach him breeding and training. As the children grew older and more independent, Tanner and Olivia found themselves with more time together again. They would take long rides into the mountains, just the two of them, and talk about everything and nothing. They made plans for the future, discussing how to expand the ranch, whether to add more cattle or focus on horses, what each child might choose to do with their lives. "Thomas will stay," Olivia said with certainty one day. "He loves this land as much as you do. Caroline might want to go to a city, somewhere she can study art properly," Tanner mused. "And Daniel will probably end up with the largest horse breeding operation in Montana," Olivia said, laughing. "They are good children," Tanner said. "We did well." "We did," she agreed. When Thomas turned 21, he began courting a young woman from town, the daughter of the general store owner. Her name was Sarah, and she was sweet and kind, clearly smitten with Thomas. Tanner approved, and Olivia adored her. The wedding took place the following spring, and Thomas brought Sarah home to the ranch. Tanner had built them a small house on the property, close enough to help with the work but far enough for privacy. Within a year, Olivia and Tanner became grandparents when Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Emma. Holding his granddaughter, Tanner felt the wheel of life turning. He thought about his own parents, dead so many years ago, and wished they could see what he had built. A family. A legacy. Something that would continue long after he was gone. Caroline eventually did leave for Denver to study art at a proper school, though she came home every summer. She never married, preferring to focus on her work, but she was happy, and that was all Tanner and Olivia wanted for her. Daniel, as predicted, developed the horse breeding operation, bringing in prime stock from across the West and earning a reputation for quality animals. He married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring spread, combining their lands and creating one of the largest operations in the region. As Tanner and Olivia grew older, they gradually stepped back from the daily work, letting Thomas and Daniel handle more of the responsibilities. They spent their days tending a large garden Olivia had always wanted, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and simply enjoying each other's company. One evening, when Tanner was in his 60s and Olivia a few years younger, they sat in their favorite spot on the porch. The mountains were painted purple and gold in the sunset, and the sounds of family, their children and grandchildren playing in the yard, filled the air. "You remember what you said that first night?" Tanner asked. "When I found you in the barn." Olivia smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "I begged for just one night." "Just one night," he repeated, "and I got a lifetime instead, the best lifetime I could have imagined." She reached over and took his hand, her fingers still fitting perfectly between his. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one," he said honestly. "Everything I have, everything I am, is because you walked into my life that day. You made me complete." "You saved me," she said softly. "In every way a person can be saved. You gave me safety and love and a family and a home. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Tanner corrected. "That is what love is, Olivia. Giving and receiving, supporting and being supported, building something together that neither of us could have built alone." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting and the stars began to appear. Below them, someone lit the lanterns, and warm light spilled out from the windows of the house and the surrounding buildings. The laughter of children and the murmur of adult conversation drifted up to them. "I hope when I die it is here," Olivia said suddenly. "On this porch with you beside me, surrounded by all of this, everything we built together." "That is my hope too," Tanner said, "though I hope we have many more years before then." "However many we have, they will be enough," she said. "Because every day with you has been a gift." The years continued their steady march, but Tanner and Olivia faced them together, as they had faced everything since that night in the barn. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated births and weddings, mourned the inevitable losses that come with time. When Tanner was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia one harsh winter. For days he drifted in and out of consciousness, Olivia never leaving his side. But his strong constitution pulled him through, and when he finally recovered, they both understood how precious their remaining time together was. "I am not ready to leave you," he told her one night, still weak but recovering. "Then do not," she said fiercely. "Stay with me. We still have years left, I feel it." And they did. Tanner lived to be 83, still sharp-minded though his body had slowed. Olivia was 78, her hair white now but her eyes still that same brilliant green. They spent their final years much as they had spent their middle years, side by side, watching their family grow and thrive around them. On a warm summer evening, surrounded by 3 generations of the family they had created, Tanner Garrison took his last breath with Olivia holding his hand. He slipped away peacefully, a small smile on his face, and Olivia knew he had gone content, having lived a full and happy life. She mourned him deeply, as one mourns the loss of half their soul. But she also celebrated him, telling their grandchildren and great-grandchildren stories of the man who had found a desperate woman hiding in his barn and offered her not just one night, but a lifetime of love and security. Olivia lived 2 more years after Tanner's death, staying in the house they had built together, surrounded by family. On her own last day, she gathered her children around her and spoke her final words clearly. "Take care of each other," she said, "and remember that love is what matters most. Your father taught me that. He took a chance on a stranger and built a life with her beyond anything either of us had dreamed. That is what I want for all of you. Love fearlessly, give generously, and hold tight to what matters." She closed her eyes that evening and did not open them again, passing peacefully in her sleep. The family buried her next to Tanner on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land, and the family they had created together for eternity. Years later, decades later, the Garrison Ranch still stood, passed down through the generations. Thomas's children and grandchildren worked the land their great-grandfather had claimed and built. Caroline's paintings hung in galleries across the West, a lasting testament to the artistic soul who had grown up in the mountains. Daniel's horses were legendary, sought after by ranchers and breeders throughout the region. And on quiet evenings, when the family gathered on the porch of the old house that had been expanded and updated but still retained its original heart, they would tell the story. The story of how it all began, with a desperate woman hiding in a barn and a lonely man who offered kindness without expectation of reward. "Just one night, please," they would quote, telling the tale to the youngest generation. That is what great-grandmother said. And great-grandfather gave her a lifetime instead. The children would listen wide-eyed, as children always do to stories of how their family began. They learned the lesson that Tanner and Olivia had lived, the lesson that echoed through every generation that followed. That love and kindness and choosing to help someone in need could change the course of lives. That taking a chance on someone could lead to extraordinary things. That a single moment of compassion could ripple forward through time, affecting people not yet born. The ranch stood as their monument, but the real legacy of Tanner and Olivia Garrison was not the land or the buildings or even the family business. It was the love they had shared, the example they had set, and the proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when you open your door and your heart to someone in need. On the hillside where they rested, wildflowers grew thick every spring, as if the land itself remembered the love story that had played out upon it. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right through the mountains, you could almost hear the echo of laughter, the murmur of conversation on a porch at sunset, the sound of two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful that would last forever. That was the story of Tanner and Olivia Garrison, the mountain cowboy who found a woman hiding in his barn, and the woman who begged for just one night but received and gave a lifetime of love instead. It was a story of second chances and new beginnings, of choosing compassion over convenience, of building something lasting from a moment of desperate need. And in the end, it was proof that sometimes the most extraordinary lives begin with the simplest acts of human kindness. All it took was one man willing to see another person's need and respond with generosity. One woman brave enough to ask for help when she needed it most. And two hearts willing to take a chance on something neither expected but both desperately needed. The sun set over the Montana mountains, just as it had done for countless years, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple and red. The ranch below bustled with the activity of another generation carrying forward the work and the love that had started it all. And on the hillside, two headstones stood side by side, bearing simple inscriptions. Tanner James Garrison, 1855-1938. Beloved husband, father, grandfather, he gave shelter to a stranger and found his home. Olivia Me Garrison, 1862-1940. beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She asked for one night and gave a lifetime. Between the stones, carved into a single piece of granite that connected them even in death, were the words that summed up everything they had been to each other. Together, always. And so the story ended as all good stories should, with love triumphant, family thriving, and the certain knowledge that what Tanner and Olivia had built together would continue long after they were gone. They had taken a moment of desperation and transformed it into a legacy of love that would echo through generations. Proof that sometimes the most important thing you can do is open your door when someone asks for help, because you never know if you might be opening your door to everything you have been looking for without knowing it. The mountains stood eternal, witnesses to the love story that had unfolded in their shadow. The barn where it all began still stood too, rebuilt and repaired over the years but never torn down, a reminder of where everything started. And in the hearts of every garrison who came after, the story lived on, told and retold, a family legend that was also a family truth. Just one night, please. Those 5 words had changed 2 lives completely, setting in motion a love story for the ages. And generations later, they still had the power to move hearts and remind people that compassion and love and taking chances on each other are what make life worth living. That was the true ending, not in death but in continuation, in the ongoing life and love and legacy that Tanner and Olivia Garrison had created together from that single moment when he found her hiding in his barn and chose kindness over suspicion. Everything else had flowed from that choice, a river of love and family and joy that would continue flowing long after the people who started it had returned to the earth.